Happy Hanukkah, everyone! I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to the 8th night of the 2021 ChemKnits Hanukkah special. Tonight is a really special video that is something I wanted to do for a really long time and actually inspired the loose theme that I wanted to do for the videos this year. Tonight, I want to layer 8 different colors of acid dye powder and speckles to create a heavy speckled colorway. Before we jump in, well, first, please subscribe. It's the best way you can help support the content here. But I do want to let you all know that I had not yet filmed the video where I revisited using a salt shaker to help with heavy speckles when I filmed this video. And actually, this project I'm about to show you is something that really inspired me wanting to take another look at using the salt shaker for speckles. But anyway, let's go look at the colors. For this heavy speckled colorway, I am going with shades of blue and green, going full on Rebecca. And the colors that I've picked are, these are all Dharma acid dyes in baby blue eyes, Carribean blue, midnight blue, tornado gray, which is new and doesn't have its own little paint swatch, intense iris, royal purple, Kelly green, and teal green. I am not quite sure how I want to do the speckling. I know that I want to mix the dyes with citric acid, but I have been having this internal debate over whether I want to do low immersion on the stovetop or if I want to do a countertop based approach. So I think that we will start on the stovetop, and if I'm not quite getting the effect that I want, then we will transition over onto the countertop. Either way, I know that the colorway will be really, really, really gorgeous. So that isn't something that I'm worried about. There is, however, one other check that I would like to do, and that is to quickly put a little bit of each of these colors onto a skein of Knit Picks Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino, that I plan to quickly dunk in some water with vinegar. And I have checked old, like, random swatch pictures that I've taken in the past, and I am fairly confident that all of these have different hues in powder form, but I'd just like to double check in case I want to swap one of the colors out. I put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and with a little popsicle stick, I took a little bit of each of the dye colors and put it onto my now damp skein of yarn, just to double check the colors. These are all feeling very different. The one thing that does feel a little bit similar is the intense iris. Actually, but now I'm seeing more of the purples come through. That one, I don't know if that one breaks. It's a tiny bit similar to the tornado gray, but I am going to leave it. And I think that if all of these colors blend together a little bit on the yarn, the resulting color will still be very, very beautiful. Everything here is very blue leaning already, with 2 that are slightly more outside, but those will mix with the colors we have there. And so, yeah, I think that this is our palette, and now we just need to prepare the dye. But I will be using this skein as we go to wipe my fingers, to wipe up the counter if needed, and things like that. In 8 different containers, I have 1 heaping teaspoon of citric acid powder. And then using some more of these popsicle sticks, I did 2 heaping-ish scoops of the dye and stirred it in to the citric acid powder so it would be well mixed. One of the big reasons for mixing the dye with citric acid powder is not just does it provide acid that helps the speckles strike where you put them, but it also dilutes the dye powder, which makes it easier to spread it out over a larger surface area, which results in finer, small speckles. And given that we're going to layer so many different colors of speckles on this yarn, I want them to be spread out, and even if the final color ends up feeling almost tonal, I don't think it'll be quite that heavy, but I want to be able to spread these colors out, which is why we're diluting them with the citric acid powder. And here we have it, our colors, which are a little bit hard to distinguish here in their powder form, but with these buckets, it should be really easy for me to reach in and take the powders I need. I am going to go ahead and cover these until I'm ready to start using them, just so that way we don't end up with any spills or anything. I pre-soaked all of our yarn, which is wool to dye for platinum and DK, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, in some tap water with some healthy splashes of white vinegar overnight. I don't always add acid to my pre-soak, and since doing countertop speckles followed by steam sending was a contender here today, even though I'm now going to start with immersion, I wanted to have the acid ready to go so that way I could really just jump into it. But as I said, we're going to start with some immersion dyeing. So let's go set up. So I might be overthinking it. I mean, I have a small vision in my head of what I'm going for, but also I'm gonna look and see what the dyes are doing and lean into that. So I know I'm not gonna be disappointed with the results. I feel like all of Chanukah has been designed leading up to this moment where I wanted to layer colors together for speckles. But what I don't know is if I want to have 300 grams of yarn in the pan or 200 grams of yarn in the pan. And there are perks to both. With the yarn more spread out, it's going to take fewer flips for me to get the kind of coverage that I want. But also, there's a chance that some of the colors may spread more because even if we have less liquid, you can see that there's areas where we can see down to pan. And so therefore, I think I'm going to go with 300 instead of 200. I have my best success at getting really heavy speckles with like 100 grams of yarn in the pan, because then each time I add more speckles, the same yarn is getting more and more. So we'll have to see how this ends up. Likely this will require this is going to require a lot of flips, but again, this is like our prototype or test one, version 1 of this kind of effect. To our yarn, I am going to add 4 cups of water with 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. I want there to be a lot of acid in here because I really, really want, we can probably add a little bit more. I want a lot of acid in here because I want the speckles to strike on the faster side. I'm adding 2 more cups of water. So we're now going to have 4 tablespoons of vinegar in 6 cups of water. And yeah, a lot of the yarn, most of the yarn is still above the surface, but we have, when we move the yarn, there is some liquid there, and that is what I like to see. So now we're going to heat things up. Okay, we are warm. Let's start, and I'm going to do a little bit of each color to start with some teal green. I plan to eventually bring all of these colors all over. Now, I'm not wiping off, this is our Kelly green, my gloves in between different colors. I'm just letting it ride. But I do want to make sure my fingers are dry. This is maybe the royal purple. So as I'm speckling, it's very much like adding like salt or something to it, and we are seeing some spread. Here is our intense iris. And so my goal is to add small layers and sort of slowly versus adding too much. So then we can really, really layer it on. Okay, and now baby blue eyes. And so I want to go for heavier specks, but yeah. I mean, part of my plan, if I was going to do the countertop, was to do a few colors and then steam set and then do some more colors. This one is Carribean blue, which is quite different from the baby blue eyes. Then midnight blue. There's some water there. Oh, that was a bigger clump. That happens. But we're going to be putting a lot of these all over. But the other reason for doing this first little test was, and this one is our tornado gray. Part of a big reason for doing this test was for me to see what colors are dominant in here as we get going. Okay, and from up here on camera, the Kelly green and the Caribbean blue are by far the dominant colors because they are giving us the most
spread. I am very happy with the range of colors we have in here, but I do think I want to add a little bit more citric acid to the Kelly Green and Caribbean Blue, just to help dilute them a little bit more. And I'm going to start coming in with some more colors and start going a little bit all over. But it's not even that the Caribbean Blue and the Kelly Green are the most pigmented. The colors that we have here in our set, I think it's just that those are two colors that are more prone to spreading. And so therefore, if we dilute them a little more, they will still spread, but it may not have as large of an impact. And I am working on 2 pans at a time and just trying to spread these colors out and just layer them on and on and on. And now's another good time to talk about, I like speckling with my fingertips. Some people like using dusting wands or various spoons, and there's not really a wrong way to do it. The wrong way to do it is a way that you don't like. That's what I would call the wrong way to do it. Okay, here's our Kelly Green, and I'm gonna go really a little lightly with it, just to see how we are performing now. But I think that it's pretty. And I think all these colors are pretty. And if we end up feeling like bright teal because of the green and Caribbean blue with these other colors on it, that is okay as well. But you can sort of adjust things as they go. And we've got our teal. Oh, I love dark teal. I love it. But yeah, I think that the other thing I'm going to have to remember is that these speckles are really getting heavy right here. But when we go and flip, there's going to be a ton of white. A ton of it. So that's why I will probably have trouble stopping, because I'm going to want like more and more and more color to get the kind of coverage that I want. But doing all these different colors is a lot of fun. And I think after this round I'm going to try to separate the Kelly Green and the Caribbean Blue from the rest, just so that way I can keep track of which ones those ones are. I will lose track of all of the other colors at some point, just because they look in powder form, they look very similar, and I know I'm not going to be ordered about where I keep them the entire time, which is okay, which is very okay. Here is our Caribbean Blue, which again, I diluted a bit more, trying to really spread it as I go. Now, another thing, I could have gone light with all these different colors and created something multicolored and speckled with 8 colors. That would have been another choice, another really good choice. But I really hope that when I get to the end, I'm not like, oh, why does this feel so much lighter than what I felt like I was doing in the pan? And ultimately, you know what that can come down to? The fact that when we speckle, we are just hitting like one side of a strand. It's not necessarily going all the way through. Although when we flip, we might see that we have some spread, but we also may not. So we may decide moving forward that we will do less layers and more flips, but we will see. The nice thing about speckles, though, it's going to be really easy to focus adding more color onto areas where there's less color from the previous rounds, which is a good thing. All right, and last up we've got our Tornado Gray. I have to say, I'm really liking where this is going. I think the green is making more of an impact than what I had originally imagined, but I also did not want to pick 8 colors that are like all shades of blue or all shades of purple. I wanted there to be something in here that would feel like it popped a little bit, and I feel like we are doing that. But now, as we wait 10 minutes, let's zoom in to just appreciate this confection of speckles and color. So I don't know if any of these colors break, but we are layering these on top of each other, which will give us a very broken feel. Like over here, that feels so magical to me. And so by going sort of slowly all over and keeping that up, that's giving some time for some colors to strike and set onto the yarn. And so, yeah, we have this mottled effect. But this is one layer. We're gonna need to do a lot more color, and so things may feel much more muted in the end than they do right now, just because if they spread out and we get like a more pastel base, that will affect what we see and feel here. But anyway, I will be back when the timer goes off. I'm not even gonna check. I'm gonna go ahead and flip and just sort of trust. So see, we do have some patches where things have spread. You know, one thing that I think would make a difference on a colorway like this would be being able to do this with even less water, and then having like a steaming cabinet, some kind of proofing cupboard or something. Like a lot of the dyers that dye a lot more volume than me have. And that's something that I would love, love, love to be able to have the space for someday. But now we're gonna speckle on the second side. This time I started with the Caribbean blue and Kelly green because those colors, since they spread the most, they probably need the most time to strike anyway. And so layering those on at the very beginning of the round will give them closer to, say, 15 minutes plus before I go ahead and flip again. But just like before, although this time not starting off with the stripes, I layered on all of these 8 colors, trying with each subsequent color to add more to areas that seem a little bit more white. And I'm very, very excited. And oh, something has some like more berry speckles. Maybe it's that royal purple, because I do see, certainly in the other pan, I don't know in this one, some pops of pink, which I'm not mad at all. I think the whole thing has this like floral, fun Rebecca feel to it that I am really here for. But once I finished the second side, I set a timer for 10 minutes and then I'll be back. Before we flip, I'm gonna add just a little bit of water. I added some during the 10 minutes as well. I have never burnt yarn, and I don't intend for this gorgeousness to be the first time I do. I am really, really happy with how this is going. I hope I continue to feel that way throughout this whole colorway. But clearly, like, there's areas where we don't have as much color, and so I will be needing to flip this potentially more times than I would if I was doing full skeins, just because of the way that minis layer together, and sort of they have more ability to shift as I turn and open things up. And so we're going to start seeing more speckled patches in this flip and subsequent flips. And so I might not be using, well, this time I'm going to use all 8 colors. But in subsequent flips, I may not use all 8 colors, because if we have just like a tiny patch where I want to add more, then, you know, I won't add as much as if it feels like there is a larger patch. But as I open this up, I am trying to, if I see areas with more coverage already, I'm trying to look for areas with less to sort of expose those more at the surface. And now we speckle. It is a little bit easier to get full coverage on the DK weight pan, which is still off camera, just because there are fewer strands. So a speck on a strand goes a little bit further than it does for the fingering weight yarn, which isn't a problem. And I'm still so far, I think being fairly consistent side by side with what I am adding on. But as I mentioned, my plan is if there's large areas of white, then I will go ahead and do all 8 colors. But if I'm flipping and there's just smaller patches, I might stick with 3 or 4, alternating the ones that I use each time, so that way we don't overload some areas. But I still really want this yarn to have a very heavy speckled feel. I won't cry if there are some areas with less speckles that end up on the yarn, but my goal is to try to get as fullish coverage as I reasonably can. And this is that situation where if I had 200 grams of yarn in the pan instead of 300 grams, it would be a lot easier for me to do that because I could spread out the yarn more each time. With 300 grams, the yarn it's harder to just spread it out, and so therefore I have to do more flips, but I think that that's working out for us. I could do this all day, except I'm not going to. So I actually had a zip tie break on the off-camera pan, so I have 10 loose minis, which makes me a tiny bit nervous, but this is notable because I don't think I've ever had one snap like that during the dyeing process. But anyway, I'm sure I could find spots to add more color in, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to add 8 cups of water, turn up the heat a bit, and heat this for another 20 minutes. It's already had some time since I last added some speckles to it. The goal here is to just have more liquid. There's lots of acid from what we started with in the beginning, a little bit of vinegar that we added with some of the water along the way, and then plus all of the citric acid. And you know, I see a light patch. Part of me would want to go and add more speckles, but I need to stop at some point. I'm not sure exactly how long I have been working on this, but it has been a while, so I just want to keep that in mind. I do think, you know, it's a trade-off between doing, actually I'll hop in front of the camera. There is definitely a trade-off between doing fewer batches. So, you know, the way I have it set up right now, I will do 2 batches on the stove using 2 pans, 600 grams each time. Or I could do less yarn at a time, flip it not as many times, and honestly, I'm not sure which one would take longer. It's really, really hard for me to think about that and say which would be better for dyeing the amount of yarn I want to dye. And mini skeins present a slightly different problem than a whole skein, which we would have multiple flips if we were doing full skeins here as well. But one of the challenges that the minis give is that because the butterfly ties don't keep them to all 10 of them together, when we flip things inside out, it's possible for an area to just keep getting tucked at the bottom. And that's slightly different with a whole skein. It's easier to open up and be like, oh, okay, here's the white patch. Whereas the lighter patches are sort of more distributed throughout the bundle of minis. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but yeah, I am absolutely in love with how this is coming out. I love the way that the colors have layered together. It's still variegated, but just such heavy speckles. And man, I both want to do this a lot more, and I also don't want to do this a lot more. This one is a lot more labor intensive than doing some other types of speckling. So I don't know if certainly doing this on the countertop would give sharp, smaller speckles, which wasn't quite what I wanted. But doing this on the countertop maybe would be faster to apply the dye onto the yarn, but then we'd steam set in stages. So it's sort of like a plus minus which technique is ultimately the best to achieve something like this. All I know is that I really, really love where we have ended up. It's possible that if I did something like on the countertop with more liquid, the problem is that I'd worry about, like, when I flip and move it, that I'd cause a lot of spread. And so that's the thing that would make me a little nervous and want me to set it in between doing a lot of manipulation of the fiber anyway. And so that's a big reason why ultimately I went for this immersion style. And
I love the results, and I really hope if you're opening up one of these mini skeins that you really love the results as well. I just turned off the heat, and now I am going to remove the yarn. And this is so pretty as a speckled yarn. It has this depth and dimension to it, which I think it's because we use so many colors. If I had just used like 3 colors, we would have had dimension, but since the color on here is primarily speckled versus, say, being just variegated, the colors layering on top of each other makes a difference, but it's not quite the same way. So I think having more colors really helped. But anyway, I am going to let our glorious yarn cool, and then we will wash it. And as for the dyes, I may need to mix up some of the 6 colors, some more that are not the Caribbean blue and Kelly green. Those colors, since I added more citric acid, those are going a lot further, but we will see. It's possible that I will still have plenty of the others left to complete the rest of the yarn I need. Here is our yarn mop that we have used this whole time into a warm dye bath. I'm amazed I was still able to wipe my fingers on this thing because it's got quite a bit of color in it. And, well, we are going to add some more because I managed to use up all of our dye powder, with the exception of what was just left in our little containers. So now, ooh, that one had a lot of pigment. Now I am working on rinsing these out so we can try to leave no dye behind. And we have all of our colors. Plus, I will rinse those out one more time, but we also have the sticks to rinse. And so I'm going to come in, and again, this is some water with vinegar from that pre-soak. Just little bits of all of our colors that are left. I'm amazed. I did end up mixing up more of the 6 colors I had mentioned to dye the rest. Here's the color off of those sticks. But anyway, this is something that is really nice and fun. And so now I'm going to heat this for 30 minutes, let it cool completely, and then we will wash it off camera. Let's wash the yarn. Oh my goodness. I will say, my back hurts a little bit. Oh my gosh. I'm adding some dish soap, and we're gonna cross our fingers. I know we had a lot of blues and stuff in here, but ultimately, the amount of pigment that we use for all of this yarn is not that much. So, I'm optimistic and woohoo! No bleeding, no bleeding, speckly yarn, no bleeding. I might be a little excited about this, but I am going to rinse out my soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and then hang it up to dry. I am in just absolute awe of this heavy speckled colorway. I feel like the camera just isn't capturing the color and the magic that is in here. This is one where I feel like you really need to hold it to really appreciate the layers of it. I think from afar, it almost looks like there's maybe like 3 or 4 main colors to it, but I don't think that we would have this depth to it if we didn't have all of these individual hues. I mean, I think the one color, and that is the most subtle, is probably the purple, because I think that that broke a little bit. But the blues and the greens, like you can feel the deepest and brighter blues and the teal versus the brighter green, and I love this. I'm not entirely sure what made this feel harder to dye. Actually, maybe it's because I had 300 grams of yarn in the pan
if I had, I think that maybe it would have felt easier if I had less yarn in the pan, so I felt like I had to flip it fewer times. But I found this, I don't often find speckling to be physically demanding, but for some reason this day felt a bit demanding, which is a shame because I am obsessed and I want more of this in my life. I just have to figure out a better way to do it. Here's the little batch of DK that I put a zip tie around just so that way I could keep it from getting more tangled when washing. Now I am going to attempt to separate these cleanly so that way I can twist them up. This is a whole process that's easier to do once things are dry because they actually, with their ties, pretty naturally want to separate. It's just when it's wet, then you run into the risk of making a bigger mess out of things than maybe you would otherwise. There we go. That took like less than 2 minutes for me to sort back out. But I am going to secure this with a zip tie just to keep things ordered until I am ready to twist, which will be soon. But oh my goodness, these colors are so fun. And I feel like on camera, some of the brightness and subtlety of the backdrop isn't just coming through the way I see it in person. And you know, I don't think it was the layering of 8 colors that was difficult. I think it was the layer color, wait 10 minutes, you know, covering things back up, and that was harder. Because I think trying to get heavy speckles in one color would have ultimately resulted in a similar amount of applying speckles. Yeah, I want to try this again using less yarn, because maybe if I can have a more streamlined with less yarn in the pan, there would be more batches, but if I'm spending less time on each batch, that might go a little bit easier. But please leave your tips for doing heavy speckles down in the video description. I am obsessed with it, but I think that this dyeing project took the longest to film of any of the Chanukah videos. Oh, with the exception of tomorrow night. That one took the most time. But this still was a lot of time per 100 grams that I spent on the yarn. It's worth it. Here is our gorgeous yarn mop, and I love how peacock it feels. It is so beautiful, and we were able to leave no dye left behind, and the softness of it is just a really fun contrast to the speckles. Ooh, something like this would go, like the two of them would pair so well together. That would be really fun. I know I already said this, and I don't know how much of the speckling shows up in this big pullback, but I think that this has this gorgeous subtlety to the overall colorway because we used so many different colors. I think that if I had used, again, just 3 or 4 instead of all 8, it would have been lovely. It would have felt variegated, but because we were doing more speckles versus anything that really blended the colors together, it would feel a little bit, not harsher, that might not be totally fair, but some of these differences might feel a little bit more abrupt, where everything feels just very, very soft. And oh my gosh, do I love this so much. You know, neon rainbows are something I love, but I think that this might be my favorite colorway of Chanukah. Anyway, I have some twisting to do. This yarn is just so pretty, and I love it so much. I feel like still from far away, it almost, if you squint, could look tonal. And then when you zoom in and you see just like the depth of all of these different speckles and the spread, it really is so special, and I am so proud of it. So, so proud of it. What colors would you combine? It doesn't have to be 8, but what colors would you layer together? Again, I think that part of this magic was that I picked colors that have different colored speckles, but are still ultimately fairly close together. And because we're speckling and you can then see each of those colors individually versus something more liquid or where we were spreading the colors and so they can blend on top of each other a little more, this these subtle differences that we have in there with the teal and bright green and all these blues really does make it feel more subtle, but also have all this depth, which is fantastic. It's fun to see the yarn mop sort of against all of these. I like really showing contrast of how the same colors used differently creates different effects, which I know could feel fairly obvious, but it's always just fun to me to see how things come out when I'm putting all my focus and attention in there versus where my attention is not quite as focused and it's more free-flowing. I really enjoy that contrast. Some of the different colors from different batches are really, really subtle. Like there's almost a little bit more purple on the skeins that are on this far left, and the ones more on the right are a bit more green, just based on the pans and the batches that they were in. But ultimately, it's pretty darn close.
After filming this video, I wanted to look at other techniques for doing heavy speckles. And so, as I mentioned in the intro, I revisited using salt shakers to apply speckles heavily onto yarn. And I actually have some, since that video, I have some other containers that I want to try that are a little lighter, that still have lids, and that would allow me to play with a lot more colors in a much faster and probably manageable way. So I will be revisiting this project. Please let me know what kinds of colors you want to see me play with down in the video description. I'm really excited to play with heavy speckles more. So please, I keep track of all of your suggestions and comments and color suggestions, and I pull from that frequently as I go and film new videos. Tonight is the 8th night of Hanukkah, but the ChemKnits Hanukkah special isn't over. There are still 4 more videos. And so you can find them here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel every night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow night is a bonus 9th video to round off the samplers that I sent out. And then the next 2 videos will be looking at some full skein colorways I dyed just for this series. And then finally, there is a vlog where I'll go a bit behind the scenes, talk about all the things I felt like I couldn't share to avoid spoilers throughout the entire process. I want you to all know how much I have enjoyed hanging out in the live chat during the premieres for the first 4 nights of Hanukkah, and I'm so excited for you to see all the yarn from the rest of the nights. Please let me know down in the comments below. I am so proud of these colorways and really hope that if you had a sampler, you've enjoyed it, or if you didn't have a sampler, you enjoyed watching me create all of these colorways. Again, please subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. This is the biggest way that you can help support the content here. If you'd like other ways to help support the content here, I do have a Patreon and an Etsy shop filled with my hand-dyed yarn. You can find links to both in the video description. But truly, the biggest way you can help support the content here is by engaging with the videos, giving them a like, leaving a comment below. That really does help the channel so much. I need to stop talking now because I need to go start editing night 9 of Hanukkah, which has the most footage of, I think, any video I have ever filmed for this channel. There will be a lot of time lapses, so I don't know if the video itself will be long, but it might be long. So I cannot wait for you to see it tomorrow night. Again, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And thank you so much for watching, and happy Hanukkah!